something in me, and it's probably for a reason. And that is that no matter what you come in, this has nothing to do with what I'm speaking about, but it's timely. No matter what you encounter, you have two choices. You only have two choices. The choices are, A, you're going to walk in faith, and faith primes the pump for God to do something. Amen. And then there's B, anything else. Because anything else is usually walking in some type of fear, and fear primes the pump for something else to happen. So we have to make sure that we are always, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the situation that surrounds us, that we operate and we react to things, not from the flesh. Because the flesh, what's the word say? The flesh is death. The flesh is death. So if we react out of the flesh and we walk by the flesh and we operate out of the flesh, we can only look for what the flesh can provide. Because the flesh cannot provide life. It cannot. If it were not true, then God wouldn't have said it. But God, in all of His wisdom, in all of His love for every single one of us, provide us a system where we can walk every single day. See, we can't make the mistake of waiting for something to happen to prime the pump. If you've ever had a well at your house, you want that well running all the time so that when you turn that faucet on, water comes out. But see, if you don't have your pump primed, when you go to turn that faucet on, it's not going to work. So we have two opportunities. We can either walk in faith, and faith releases God's hand to be able to work, or we can operate in fear. And we choose to operate in faith. Amen? Amen. So tonight I want to talk about, if you'll turn with me to Ephesians 5, verse 8. I want to talk about living in the light of God. Living in the light that He's provided us. Ephesians 5, 8. We're going to read it in the King James, and then actually I want to read it in the Message Bible because I love the way it says it. So 5, 8 through 14. For you were sometimes darkness, but you are now light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it is shame to even speak of those things which are done in secret. But all things that are reproved and are made manifest by the light, for whosoever doth make manifest is light. Wherefore he saith, Awake, thou sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give you light. Now the Message Bible says it like this, and this is great. You groped your way through the murk once, but no longer. You're out in the open now. The bright light of Christ makes your way plain. No more stumbling around. Get on with it. The good, the right, the true. These are the actions appropriate for daylight hours. Figure out what will please Christ and then do it. Verse 11. Don't waste your time on useless work, mere busy work, the barren pursuits of darkness. You know what that's saying? Just pause right there. The barren means that it cannot produce fruit. It means it doesn't have the ability to produce an offspring, a fruit of any kind. The barren pursuits of darkness. Expose these things for the sham that they are. It is a scandal when people waste their lives on things that they must do in the darkness, where no one will see. Rip off the cover of those frauds and see how attractive they look in the light of Christ. Wake up from your sleep. Climb out of your coffins. Christ will show you the light. So watch your step, use your head, and make the most of every chance you get. These are desperate times. Isn't that good the way that says that? Yeah, we once walked and groped. It doesn't just say walk, but groped in the murk, in the muck, in the mud, the nasty, just groping. You know, if you think about it, you can't really see until you have accepted Christ in your life and Christ has changed the way you look at things. Amen. So when you're outside of that, you're walking in that darkness, when it says that you're groping in the murk, it's because you can't see. You can't see. Everything is darkness. Every way you turn, to the right, to the left, behind you, and in front of you, all you see is darkness. But Christ has provided us a way out. John 8:12. Then Jesus spake again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Amen. Now, in studying for this, God showed me something. And we're going to walk through it a little bit. But when we think about the darkness, and I know I've even been guilty of saying this, and to some degree it's true, but we got to think it out a little bit, and that is the intent, as we go farther and farther along in the end times, the world gets darker. The world gets darker. And it's supposed to get lighter for us. There's no possibility. God didn't create darkness. Let's just say that. We're going to go to Genesis 1. But God created light to expel the darkness. Think about this. I can go back there and I can turn on the light in that sound booth and turn these lights on. And of course the darkness goes away. But I can't go back there and turn the light switch on for dark. The power switch on for dark. Because God didn't create dark. God created light. Turn with me to Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the earth. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. God created light, and he separated it. I want you to understand that the definition of darkness is the absence of light. There's no created darkness. So the definition of darkness is the absence of light. I'm just telling you that as long as we're walking this earth and we're doing what we're supposed to do, we are the ones that are tasked. We have a mission to carry the light into the dark places, to expel the darkness. See, Jesus, if you look at his life over and over and over again, he walked into dark situations and expelled the darkness. Amen. He walked into dark situations and expelled disease and infirmity. He changed his environment, not waiting for the environment to change him. So if we walk in the light, the word says that we're supposed to walk in the light just like Jesus walked in the light. So if we walk in the light as we're supposed to, we are light bearers. We are light carriers. We are to carry our light, which shines forth Jesus and the Father, and we're to carry that message out into the darkness. See, we shouldn't walk into a room that's dark spiritually. Because the minute we walk into the room and it's dark spiritually, it should light up and things should change. Amen. Pastor started half talk about my sermon this morning, and he was talking about Kim and singing in Africa and how that person that was demon possessed came up and that person was carrying darkness, but the light changed the situation. I remember when Pastor and I went to Africa, to Niger, the plane ride was like 14 hours. It was some ridiculous amount of time. It was not fun. Okay? But when we flew into Niger, it was actually night. We had started early in the morning, and we wound up at night in Niger. And when we flew in, the one thing that made an impression on me is that you look out the windows as you're flying into Niger, and it doesn't look anything like when you fly in the United States at night. Because when you fly in the United States at night, everything's lit up. You see you can see the streets because you see the street lights. You see the buildings. You see everything from way up high. But when you fly into Niger, you see nothing at night. You might see a little grouping of lights in the main city, but then you see nothing. It's completely dark. And that has made an impression on me from that day. That if we look at that, and we say, we're flying into a world that's full of darkness. But we're bringing the light. We're not expecting the light to be there. We're bringing the light to change and expel the darkness. To change those circumstances and to change those situations. 2 Corinthians 4:6. For God who said, let light shine out of the darkness, is the one who has shown in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory and the majesty of God clearly revealed in the face of Christ. You know, so many times in the Word, you know, it talks about, you know, even as we're kids, we're singing, you know, this little light of mine, right? And we're teaching the kids that. And we're talking about taking that lamp. That's what the Word's talking about. Is it talks about taking the lamp and would you hide it under a bushel? You know, Pastor talked this morning even about how someone was working underneath their sink and they had to have a flashlight under there that we couldn't see. But, you know, I remember one time that I was working in an apartment and I had a flashlight under the sink and I had done all my work and then I gathered my stuff and I shut the doors in the front of the cabinet. And then I'm looking through my stuff and I'm like, where did my flashlight go? What did I do with that? It was still in there, still on, but those doors were keeping me from seeing it. We are the ones who go forth into the dark world, the dark places, the dark people, that all they know is dark, to expel that darkness from that situation. We're supposed to be walking in the light. Darkness cannot overtake the night. Or the darkness can't overtake the light. Darkness is purely the lack of the light's presence. The dark will never overtake the light. And the darkness of Satan and his plans and his way of doing things will never overtake the light of Christ, provided that we, his representatives, his ambassadors on this earth, walk in the light as we've been told to. John 1, verse 4. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. The darkness doesn't understand the light because they're two different systems. They're two different ways of doing things. In the Amplified, it says it like this: in him was life and the power to bestow life. And the life was the light of man, and the light shines on in the darkness, and the darkness did not understand it, or overpower it, or appropriate it, or absorb it. It is unreceptive to it. You see, we live in a world that's completely full of darkness. Everywhere we go, everything we do, every news story that's on, everything around us, every person doesn't have a relationship with the Father. The way they talk, the way they live, the way everything. And it's getting, that part of it gets darker because those people just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the darkness. But see, we are here for an appointed time. See, it's not a mistake that you're walking this earth today, that you're breathing today, that you're here tonight, that you're going to work tomorrow, or you're going to wherever you're going tomorrow. It's not a mistake because God has appointed you for a job. God has appointed you as an ambassador of light to go forth into the darkness and expel the darkness. You know, at work, I'm the supervisor of all the maintenance staff. My boss expects that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to manage that crew and that complex the way it's supposed to be done. And I'm going to take the authority given to me and make sure it's done the right way. And whatever that means. So does that mean that I have to discipline employees sometimes? Sure, it means that. But it's my responsibility because I've been given the authority and the mandate as an ambassador for the company to take the company's best interest at heart and make sure that I go above and beyond to make sure everything is done the way it's supposed to be done. And the same thing is true. And we have no problem thinking about that. We have no problem spending time going to work and saying, oh, I'm at work and I'm supposed to have work's best interest here. I'm on the clock, I should do the right thing, and all those things, which we should be doing. But how much more? How much more? Yeah. See, I had this job, and I am very thankful for that job and what they've given me and what it's allowed my family to do. But ain't nobody died for me to have that job. Amen. Ain't nobody shed any blood for me to have that job. Ain't nobody took a beating to provide that job for me. But my Father, made me an ambassador, a carrier of a message, of a light. And somebody did die on a cross. And somebody did shed every drop of blood they had. And somebody did take a tremendous beating on their body so that I could walk today carrying that very light. Amen. How dare I to get up in the morning and not think about the light of Christ? Amen. How dare I to ever put anything else before His message? God loved us so much. So much. That He sent His only Son to die on the cross. We are ambassadors of light. We are ambassadors of the Father. Just as Jesus was an ambassador of the Father as He walked this earth, He said so many times, I don't do anything unless the Father tells me to do it. I don't say anything unless the Father tells me to say it. We are ambassadors of the kingdom of God. We are ambassadors of a completely different kingdom than the world is used to seeing. The world knows the kingdom of darkness, and that's all that they know. But we are ambassadors of the kingdom of light. And that light should go in and go before us and go behind us and go beside us and change the circumstances around us. There's a story in the Word about the disciples, and they're going down the path, and in the very shadow of them passing over people, healed. That very presence. They didn't ask to be prayed for. They didn't say, God, oh, help me, pray for me. They didn't cry out in that particular instance. And the disciples had no idea until after it was done. Because they were carrying the light of Christ, the light of the Father. Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, verse 21. Because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like unto corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things, because people made idols and put idols before the Father. We must never be able to put ourselves into a situation where we make something else more important than the Father. Make something else of more effect than what the Father is. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, "In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine in them." That the God of this world. Do you think that's any less true today than it was when this was penned? No, it's more true. Because over all this time, the God of this world, which we know to be Satan, has spent all of this time, these years and years and years, continuing to perfect his blinding of men's hearts. You know, we hear about all the time, you know, about this church and how people will drive by for years and years and years and years and years and go, "I didn't even realize there was a church there." How as big as this building is, as many lights as we got going, as big as the parking lot is and the property is, it's 22 acres. How in the world can somebody drive by this place every single day and not realize there's even a church sitting there? That's fairly easy to answer, and that is that the God of this world has blinded their eyes, their spiritual eyes, from seeing the truth. See, there's going to be a reckoning one day when all is revealed. All is revealed. And every opportunity that someone had to turn their life around and do the right thing will come to forefront. Everyone, the word says that everyone is going to have their opportunity. No one is going to be punished without having that chance to make it right. Our God is so much light that it's so blinding. You know, when they talk about the Word of God, that people couldn't even look upon the face of God because the glory of God, the light and the glory of God was so bright, it would kill them to look upon his face. That's what our God is. And our God has put that on the inside of every single one of us. That we also would be light bearers and light ambassadors for him. Matthew 5, verse 14. "And you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all of them that are in their house. And let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." That we wouldn't take our candle, our light, of what God's given us, and hide it under a bushel. Hide it. And not make it of most importance. But the word says that you take that candle, and not just do you not hide it under a bushel, but you put it on a candlestick so it sits up taller than everything else so that you can shine the light through the entire house. You know this to be true if you've ever had a situation where you had the power go out and you're using a flashlight or you're using a candle to try to light the area because you have no power. You understand how much light a candle even can give off in a dark situation. Now we have thousands and thousands of lumens in this auditorium tonight, lighting the way for us. And it's nice and bright, and that's great. But if the power were off right now, and everything was down, there was no light in here, and we took one single flashlight, one single candle, and lit it, it would light up this whole entire auditorium. Now it wouldn't be as bright as this, but it would light up this whole entire auditorium enough for everyone to move around safely. Because that's the kind of power that God has put in light. See, it is not, I don't believe it's by mistake, that light was created first. He put a priority on expelling the darkness right off the bat. The Word of God says that the world was without form and void and full of darkness. Meaning that the light was absent. That the light was absent, and he created the light for us. John chapter 3, verse 19. And this is the condemnation, that the light is come into the world, and that men love darkness rather than the light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hate the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they were wrought in God. Think about that. Think about that. So how much crime happens during the day, and how much crime happens at night?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
You know, they used to say, ain't nothing good happens after midnight. Things like that, right? But if you think about the crime and you think about how things work, and our whole society and systems are set up to combat the darkness. There's more police on patrol at night than there is during the day. They do that on purpose because statistics say more bad things happen at night. So why is it set up that way? Because darkness has overtaken the world. And darkness and crime and the things that people do to each other. The things that people do to kids. The things that people do to family members. My mind, it seems like every single day you see some sort of news about something that's happened. And you thought the last time you saw the news, it was the worst thing you've ever heard in your life. And then the news pops on and it tells you something that's even worse, even more grotesque, even more nasty, even more terrible than the last thing you saw. Because this world is not on a train that's going slow. It's on a train that's speeding towards the end. And in that speeding towards the end, people have opportunities. They have the opportunity to either walk in light or walk in darkness. And unfortunately for those in the world, many more of them are operating in the darkness than they are operating in the light. Now some of those, it's because they're making a straight up choice to do so. But I believe that there are still some of those out there that don't know, that haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to the light. If you go into, we're talking about collecting pencils and erasers, and you talked this morning about taking coloring books and coloring crayons to Africa. If you go to Africa and you go out into the bush where they don't even have any light, and you hand a child a flashlight, you'll never get that flashlight out of that child's hand. They'll hold on to that thing like it's gold. Now that we might have got that from the dollar store, it don't mean too much to us, but to somebody who has never saw the light, has never held the light, has never been able to direct the light at their path, it means everything. We are operating and we are moving around in a world that's so full of darkness. There are people all around us that has never had the opportunity to experience the light. Hold the light. Shine the light at their paths. God, our Father, cares so much about every single one of us that He provided the light. And He provided the light of the Son of Christ, of the Son of God, Christ, to come and to walk this earth, to show us the light, show us the way. We are ambassadors of that light. We have to constantly stay recharged and constantly stay where we should be. Just like a flashlight, eventually you got to replace the batteries. I used to have a flashlight, I don't know, it was a few years ago, somebody got us a flashlight. It's like one of those emergency flashlights, right? And there was a couple different ones, if I remember right. One you had to shake to try to get it to charge back up, and then there's some that you have to wind. You sit there and wind and it'll stay on for about 3 seconds, and then you gotta wind it again. So if you ever had to use it in an emergency, you would literally be walking around doing this the whole entire time. But you have to recharge that flashlight to work. You have to put new batteries in the flashlight to work. A candle, although it burns, it's only going to burn so far before it goes out, and you have to replace it with a different candle. And the same thing is true for us as believers, is that we have to constantly be recharging our light. recharging our life. Getting in the Word.
Yes.
Getting in the Word. The Word of God says that we should renew our minds. See, we're not renewing our minds all for ourselves. I think that's something that we've thought a lot of times that's kind of a fallacy, is that we're recharging our minds, we're renewing our minds partially for ourselves, but then also always about giving out. Giving out and giving out. See, if you're not recharged, you're not renewed in your mind the way that God said we're supposed to be, what are you going to be giving out when you give something out? We need to be giving out bright light.
Yes.
And the only way that happens is if we constantly keep ourselves where we're supposed to be. See, God commissioned us to walk in the light for ourselves, but then to also walk in the light so much that it changes others. It's not about us all the time. It's not about how we walk and what we do. And many times we get our very breakthrough in our lives by serving others.
That's right, absolutely.
If you want a breakthrough in your life, do something.
That's right.
You want a breakthrough in your life? Shine the light of Christ for someone else and watch Christ take care of you. See, sometimes we're all, we're like little kids. Kids are super selfish until you train that out of them. They constantly me, right? And we get so me, that everything's about us, and everything's not about us. Everything is not about us. But see, we have to follow Christ's example and the Father's example through Christ. And that it wasn't about God. That's why He sent His only Son to die on the cross. And Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, although as much as He didn't want to, because He was human, He was walking this earth as a human, He said, do I really got to do this? But immediately after that, He said, nevertheless, your will done, not mine. I will do it. For a very instant, a very moment in time, Jesus, He had formed relationships with people. He had walked with those 12 disciples. He had walked with the family members. There was the Marys. There was the Marthas. There was all the people that He had formed relationships with. And for a split second in time, He didn't want to experience that separation from them, nor the separation that He knew He was going to have from His Father. Because God had to turn His back on His only Son on that cross, because He was taking our sin upon Himself. So we must take that example that light is more important than anything that we could come up with or anything that we have to do, that shining the light of Christ is the most important job we have in everything we do. We can't afford to act out in the flesh, especially now.
That's right.
I tell Tori on a pretty regular basis, back when I was a kid and, when some of you guys were younger, there was time. That you made you could make mistakes, and that you had the time to recover. We don't have time in this planet. The planet is breaking apart. The planet is groaning.
That's right.
The earth is calling
That's right. Yes.
because it knows earthquakes, volcanoes, crazy weather patterns, crazy weather systems that come in. All those things are a sign of what is coming, the end times. And when those earthquakes are happening, it's the earth groaning in travail, because Jesus is going to come back. And when Jesus comes back, He's going to take control back to where it belongs. We don't have time to mess around. We need to put a focus on being ambassadors of light and doing and saying and being the things that Jesus was when He walked this earth to those that are around us today. Amen? Pastor?